I want to tell you that as a young, I guess a youngish man in New York City, you know how the memory has its own version of actually what happened as opposed to reality. I don't know. But in my memory, I was walking around the city and...
Which city?
This one. And I came across the marquee said, and a poster of Life is Sweet in 1990, I assume, or 91, whenever 91. It was here. Yeah.
91.
I said, oh, this looks great. I'm going to go in and check it. And I had nothing but time, of course, at that age. So I went in and I watched it, and I discovered you. You know, that was when that was probably your first, I'm guessing, film that was distributed properly.
No, it wasn't.
Properly here.
High Hopes.
It got some distribution here.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Really? Okay.
I was here with
My
them,
mistake.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you were very little.
Not so, but
okay.
I went back and watched it. But
yeah. Where?
I mean, here,
Here,
like in New York, for instance.
Oh,
I'm gonna
all over the show, really. I mean, no, it had a proper distribution.
Okay, good, very good. Well, I remember just anyway, Life is Sweet sort of took off. At least that began some America's love affair with Mike Leigh, would you say? But it was Life is Sweet, which just caught on with people in a broader way, and then the distribution I assume got much easier.
Yes, I suppose Naked really moved it on, but then of course Secrets and Lies, and we got nominated. We had 5 nominations.
All right. Yeah. So it really is a process. Let's face it. It's true. I'm thinking of the art house, or the crowd who discovers Life is Sweet. But yeah, Naked caught on in a bigger way and was in many theaters. I remember, and I just remember going to that several times and bringing friends. It was that powerful. And then I remember also, sorry, I'm going down memory lane a little bit, but meeting you the first time, I thought I would be cool and gain your, trust and your friendship if I told you that I had seen all of your teleplays, which I had.
Yes.
I rented them on Netflix, and you looked, you kind of, your face just sort of fell, and you goes, in the UK, they've done a beautiful job restoring those, but here, you've gotten these bloody awful transfers, and I pissed you off. And I don't think I ever recovered that interview.
No, I'm sure you didn't, because it was. I mean, in fact, they were put out here, my telefilms, by a company called Waterbearer. Mm-hmm. I think that's right. And they were pirate edition, and we encouraged them to do it.
Okay.
Behind the BBC's back, because there was no money in it for us nor for anybody. They were literally pirate. They were in the Upper East Side, operating out of an apartment. But the thing was, you could go into Kim's video store in St Mark's Place, and you could find my films. They were on these terrible editions, but at least you could see them. That was the point. And that's why we illicitly encouraged them to put them out behind the BBC's back. Yeah. So, I mean, that's probably what I said, I rather than, with all due respect to your memory, than castigating you for looking at them, because because they hadn't restored them at that time in the UK. That's a much more recent thing. Now there's a box set, and we did a whole restoration and commentaries and all the rest of it.
I see.
But they'd all sunk without trace, and that's one of the problems with BBC films.
Yeah. I would love to get my hands on that box set. If there was one in the
go online, you'll find it.
Yeah.
It's really straightforward. They're out there.
Very good.
Mike Leigh at the BBC, it's called. Everything's on it. It's
beautiful.
Blue.
The box or the content?
The box, because the other one, the features is red.
Okay. Is there a box of your features too? Going through what?
Up to
Happy Go Lucky. No, more recent.
No, before Happy Go Lucky.
Okay.
Up to Vera Drake.
Oh, okay.
We're hoping to do a new box set of all the films since Vera Drake.
Yeah. Well, you got to have a few more films to add to it, though. You got to get busier. Every 4 years is not cutting it.
Well, actually, you know what? Happy Go Lucky is actually 2009, so it's 10 years ago.
It is, I know, but Happy Go Lucky, you did another year. Was that after Happy Go Lucky?
Yeah, and Mr. Turner and Peterloo.
And Peterloo.
So that's another 4 films.
And you could, I don't know if legally what the ramifications are, but couldn't you also a running jump?
Oh, yes.
I saw that as well.
Yeah. Did you like it?
Yeah. in contrast to Peterloo, it was like nobody would believe it's the same filmmaker if you were just discovering you through Peterloo, and then they saw that.
Well, we were having a joke, and we with Peterloo, clearly. Whatever else we were doing, although there is humour in it, we weren't having a joke.
Oh, at Peterloo?
Yeah.
It's you're a little bit more hard pressed to find the jokes. In
well,
Peterloo.
There's humour.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Even the most, I would say, devastating moments. I guess you could say the massacre is there's nothing humorous remotely in that, but that scene, the montage, maybe you could say where the magistrates are interviewing those lower class,
sentencing them. They're not interviewing. They're sentencing
Excuse
them.
me.
Yeah. They're sending them. They're giving them the most draconian punishments for the smallest of offences. And those three scenes. Each of those was a dramatisation of a real magistrate, and those were actual cases that those guys actually tried, and the punishments were the actual ones they gave. I haven't made any of that up. That was all for real. Yeah. Outrageous though it is.
Yet, and that's amazing information you just shared, but at the same time...
There's some humour in it.
There's some weird... Yeah, just the naivete, the complete... the actors, the characters they created, which I know are based on actual people, as you just said, but their innocence.
The magistrates are drawn from the actual magistrates that existed at the time.
Okay. And the crimes, but the victims themselves, or I should say the perpetrators, quote unquote, are made up, except that they're using the actual... Right, I understand. But it's in a way, their innocence at the same time, which is all the more... Which the contrast of what they've done and what they're undergoing is what almost makes it like it's almost too crazy to be.
Yeah,
so you laugh almost at like this is insane.
But humour, the words are similar, aren't they? Humour and humane. I mean, it's the same thing, really.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out the motivation for you to tell this particular story, other than we're coming on to in just a matter of weeks or months, the 200th anniversary of
the bicentenary is on August the 16th.
That's right.
That's one of the reasons for making the film. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We just thought it would be opposite. But obviously, we felt an instinct that it would be a timely story to tell. What we didn't know is how right we were going to be, because we started planning it at the beginning of 2014. And what we didn't know was that all kinds of things were going to kick off, like Trump, like Brexit, like the rise of the far right in various places, and other things that raise questions about democracy. Mm-hmm. And the film is, of course, about democracy. So, I mean, it does seem to be. It seems our instinct was kind of right, really. Also, it's a story that ought to be told. I mean, I knew little or nothing about it when I was growing up a stone's throw from where it all happened in Manchester. Mm-hmm. And very few of us did. Although it was a big deal in the 19th century, and it resonated through the labour movement and the rise of the unions and the fight for the vote, which went on for a century. And that's primarily what they were battling about at
that's right. Yeah.
Peterloo.
Are you saying it wasn't in the history books when you were growing up in your
Hardly. But I read about it I don't remember when, probably the 70s, perhaps the early 80s, I just can't remember. I read a book. And I remember thinking, you know what, someone should do a film about this. And at that time, it would not have occurred to me for a split second that somebody might be me, because I was, as I still am, committed to making films about the contemporary world. I hadn't got around to doing period films yet at that time. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it seemed, for all sorts of reasons, including the fact that I am a native Mancunian, i.e. from Manchester, and that also felt like a good reason to investigate.
Oh, that is.
This thing.
Yeah. So you were brought in Manchester, in the city? Oh,
in Salford, which is the twin city with Manchester.
Oh, okay.
But literally, you could get to where it happened on the bus in about 15 minutes from where quarter of an hour from where I grew up.
Where did you shoot the
Not one frame of it was shot in Manchester, because they built a great Victorian city after 1819, and now it's a great modern city.
I have been there, but it's been a while.
There you go. It's got trams all over it and smart restaurants where it all happened. We shot it all over the place. The actual massacre was shot as far away from Manchester as you can get. We shot it at a place called Tilbury Fort, which is next to the docks at Tilbury, which is east of London, down on the estuary. And we took it over for a long time to build and shoot this event.
Was casting folks like, well, you used quite a number of very, very British workaday actors.
You mean working class when you say workaday?
Well, I mean, these are the actors you'll see. If you're British, you know who these actors are. They may not all be names in
well, there's a
Rory's relatively well known for his work here.
And Maxine Peake are the best known actors in it.
Right.
But frankly, there's quite a lot of actors in it. There are some that I've worked with before, quite a few. There's a huge number that I haven't. But the main point is we've got an amazing resource of actors in the UK.
I know.
And, somebody said to me the other day here in the States, presumably we had all these unknown actors because you couldn't afford the names. Which is, of course, preposterous because actually the people that were in it, the people that were the right people for it, and boy, were they good. I mean, I, as you know, can only work with what I call character actors, which is to say people that aren't narcissistic actors who play themselves, but people who are really good at playing real people out there in the street. And these guys...
That's what I meant by workaday, by the way.
Yeah. Practical, down to earth, roll up your sleeves, do it.
Craftspeople, artisans.
Absolutely, and intelligent actors. I mean, they really have to be intelligent. But
they're not YouTube stars. I don't understand why you would cast them.
I mean, the point is that they all got stuck into the research. They were all really committed to it. It was great, actually.
And you achieve a certain more of a verisimilitude, because we're not noticing, oh my gosh, I wonder if they're going to be in the next Melissa McCarthy comedy. It's just like, there's something there's more documentary feel to something.
Yes, I would question that, but the main point is, I think what you mean is not so much documentary, it's that it's real. It feels like it's real.
Yeah.
I mean, Tim McInerney, who plays the Prince Regent, is probably the best known of all of those actors, certainly to the British television audience.
Right.
But, he was... You get him doing it because he's the right man for the job, basically. And he certainly delivers this extraordinarily overblown, self-indulgent, famously so, Prince Regent,
Yeah. I don't doubt that for a moment you would have cast the same people if you were given a budget twice the size that you had to work with. However, it does probably play into reality of when you're spending a lot of money on, or a big part of your budget on, costumes and other, location issues.
Look, it was the biggest budget I've ever had, but it was a very, very small budget for what we achieved.
Right.
I mean, you talk about costumes. I mean, Jacqueline Duran, the costume designer, who's been nominated several times and won Oscars, I think, twice for other films. She is an absolute genius. She's not only brilliant at the accuracy of the costumes and brilliant at working with the actors and all the rest of it, but she is brilliant at making a pound stretch further than a pound would normally stretch. I mean, some of those military costumes actually she sourced in Italy. She does the most extraordinary tricks to get the stuff on the screen, and famously at Peterloo, the female reformers were all dressed in white, and she said, it's actually more expensive to dress them in white than if we did them in an off. I said, no, they were in white, they should be in white. She said, yes, I agree, you're quite right. They were in white.
Because you can't keep them remotely look like from scene to scene. It's almost impossible to keep them looking like they're not completely soiled and et cetera. No, whatever the reason is. Explain when you said the women.
The female reformers.
The female reformists. Those were the wives and daughters and sisters.
No.
They weren't.
No. They were actual political activists in their own right.
Okay. Were they also
Manchester,
going? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The Manchester Female Reform Society, and they came out because what they were fighting for was one man, one vote. They were not. There was a tiny minority of women who actually were onto the idea of universal suffrage, but that hadn't really happened at that time. It was all about, as is said, as one of them says in the film, it was about one vote per family.
I understand. That's what I was going to say to you right after that. You're making me feel like they're representing the family.
Well,
but you're saying that these were not necessarily...
They were fighting for the vote. I mean,
right,
what they were...
For men.
At that time, only 2% of the population had the vote, and that 2% was landowners.
Wealthy people.
Sure.
I just saw the Steve Bannon documentary. Have you guys... How could you?
I could have done, but I haven't.
Yeah, I would recommend it because it deals with some of the parallels you were drawing earlier in terms of right-wing groups in Italy and in France, et cetera, these things that are happening here are also been going on in Europe at the same time. It's unfortunate, to say the least. But I was watching some of your older films just in preparation. I had some time. Originally, we were going to do this back in the fall or something, and then there was a decision to move the film's release date here in the United States to the spring. I was thinking about, to me, in a way, this is closest film to Meantime, almost, in the sense of just the feeling of being squashed by the economic and class burden that
yes,
and in a way this is what's going on with the characters in obviously in Peterloo as well.
I think the difference is that in Meantime they are kind of crushed by
their souls, their spirits.
By the spirits are crushed. Although the what you could call the hero of the film, which is Mark, the elder brother, who you can see is going to get up and go. And
Tim Roth.
No, the other one, Phil Daniels.
Oh, okay.
Whereas this is a film about people being positive. Although you have, at the centre of the film, this working-class family, which I've obviously created, which is not a direct portrait of people that actually existed, who are working through how they feel about the movement for political reform. But they... in the end, it's about positivism. It's about hope. It's about, proper aspirations for a decent life,
See,
and fighting.
Peterloo. Yeah.
Peterloo,
yeah, because it's interesting because it ends on such a bloody scene,
Well, that's what happened, and that's what makes you happy. And therefore, what I don't do at the end of the film, I don't put a massive number of labels up that tell you what happened next and when got the vote and who went to prison and how many people were killed and all those questions that everybody wants to know. Mainly because, not least because you can go away and press buttons and find out on Wikipedia. But also, the film ends in an emotional place. I take you to an emotional place, and as I always with my films, I don't actually say, think this. I hand it over to you to go away and meditate on, really.
So is Peterloo polemical in the end?
Well, in the end, is it polemical?
No.
Well, no.
Yeah.
But it raises a huge number of questions for you to reflect upon and to debate and to argue about, if you like.
Especially because it does draw us accidentally or incidentally parallels to 2019.
Well, exactly. That's the thing. I mean, people have said to me, "Okay, tell us what it tells us. Tell us what the message is." And I said, "No, because actually it raises a whole lot of complex questions and issues, as I think probably I hope my films do." Mm-hmm. It's not in the simplistic black and white sense didactic, but of course we are dealing with political issues. We're dealing with the nature of politics. So, is it my most overtly political film to date? Of course it is. Mm-hmm. Is it more overtly political than the others? Well, it is. In fact, none of them actually are. This one. But on the other hand, are any of my previous films not political? And the answer is no. They're all political. They're all about how we live and how we operate and how we treat each other and what life is about, really.
Yeah. while so many of your films deal with loneliness and alienation and the struggle for peace of mind and, a lot of there's always the Eddie Morrison character or David Thewlis or whomever are portraying those guys. But this one...
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that. I think those are true. But on the other hand, of course, and
in Life is Sweet as well, because you have Nicola.
That's true. But you have to see these characters in relation to the other characters. I mean, Life is Sweet is also a film about making the most of things and positivism in the family, and of course, at the centre of Happy Go Lucky, you mentioned that. Fascist played by Eddie Marsan, the driving instructor. Mm-hmm. But of course at the centre of the film is an unquestionable, serious positivist, which is Poppy, which is Sally Hawkins' character, who is an idealist who really acts on it, but also is... people in some quarters have dismissed her as a sort of airhead, which she absolutely isn't. She's a very intelligent, motivated, smart, and quite serious woman with a sense of humour. I always see her, although I didn't think about this till after I'd made Happy Go Lucky, but she's a kind of counterpart to Johnny in Naked. I mean, they're both people. When we made Naked, some people said, "Oh, well, no, he's a cynic." He's not a cynic. He's a frustrated idealist. He's an idealist that is so frustrated with the material superficiality of the world.
He's very disappointed.
He's disappointed, and he turns in on himself. Whereas Poppy is equally an idealist, but is engages with the world and deals with it.
But in different circumstances, she could become Johnny. She could be similar to Johnny if she gave up.
Well, I don't think. I think
or gave in.
I think that's hypothetical because I
don't. Of course, it is. Yeah.
I don't know. No.
I'm just saying.
May I make a point, which is that I don't think that's. It's when I say it's hypothetical, I mean it's not feasible because that's not how she is. I mean, whatever her circumstances, she's one of those people that would deal with it, basically.
You don't think Johnny in his earlier days?
Well,
before the film, the prequel.
That's not the same thing. Mm-hmm. Had Johnny had a decent education, which is to say, instead of sending him outside the classroom and punishing him, his teachers had seen that this was a bright kid and brought him out, he probably would have gone to university or done whatever. Yeah, that's true. But that doesn't mean the converse is true for Poppy.
That's true. You beat me. Damn it. You beat me at my own game. Trying to...
Ah, you have a game.
Well,
that in itself is a revelation.
So I've heard you say that Meantime was your favorite.
Well, I've got a soft... I don't know my favourite
Have you
film.
changed
No, I've got a soft spot for it. Not least because when we made it for years and years, it had sunk without trace, and it only... survived in pirate copies.
As you said before.
Well, I'd get letters from people saying, I've seen this, I'm unemployed and I've been unemployed for years and I've seen this film and it's a real lifeline, and so on. So I have a soft spot for it, but, which is my favourite, I don't know. I mean, you could say I've got a soft spot for Topsy Turvy, mainly because it's in a kind of cuckoo in the nest, really. It's completely unlike anything else. I don't know.
Yeah, but if you saw, I think it would be interesting double feature to see Peterloo and then Meantime, because you could see it's like fast forwards you to the byproduct, if you will, of what came out of England at that time.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And indeed, actually, you're also right, because Meantime was completely motivated by what Thatcher and Thatcher's government were doing. We were 4 years into Thatcher's regime at that time, and they were doing all these bullshit schemes to make it appear that they were dealing with unemployment, which they weren't at all, really. And in a way, there's a kind of satire on those schemes in Meantime when their aunt creates this job for Colin to come and decorate her house,
Interesting. Yeah, I thought you were going to see in Peterloo one of the I keep referring to them as politicians, I guess, meekly suggests maybe if they get if we give the people one more pound or quid. What was the amount he wanted to give them, just so they wouldn't starve quite so much?
One of the magistrates.
One of the magistrates said,
yes.
right? And that was immediately, of course, overruled. I mean, not they're not going to give them an inch. But in a sense that there's that, as Peterloo, which, by the way, got to you spent a little time at the very end also explaining that where the name came from, and
it's a nickname invented by a journalist because it was
to sell papers.
Well, it was I think it was less cynical than that, to be honest. I think it was just
shorthand,
like the Battle of Waterloo, really, and it was a battle. It wasn't, because it isn't
was
a battle.
It's not.
No, it's not a battle.
It was a battle. At least starts with some level.
I agree. No,
right?
absolutely.
Balance of.
That's why they called it that. But no, it wasn't. It's not a battle. It was chaos, actually. People were killed, of course.
It was a massacre. I mean, it was. They closed off They closed off the plaza, and then they just.
Peterloo massacre. The word came from Waterloo on St. Peter's Field, which is the part of Manchester where it happened.
Yeah, and it's opening here in New York City. Oh, it came out in the UK, I imagine,
in the autumn,
last autumn. How'd that go?
Good.
Yeah?
It was good, yeah.
Yeah.
Tragically, although it's just had a very successful release in Italy, and it's about to open in Spain, it's not been sold to France or Germany, which I think is a great tragedy, really. Mm-hmm. I don't know why, but nobody's picked it up in France, and it is very disappointing, really.
Mm. Well, if you're listening, and there are listeners, shockingly, in France and Germany, start to write your local.
Yes, no, do. I think it would be very helpful.
Whomever you would write in this
You
case.
do that, comrades. Yeah.
And but it's opening. Let's see. Today is the 3rd of April. April, I think.
It opens this weekend.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure it is. So it opens here on April 5th in New York, and
the States.
And I urge people to go. And so many of your films are so available. If you haven't seen all of Mike Leigh's films, they're all on various shades of fantastic.
How do you get on with Career Girls?
I love that film. It made me cry.
Yeah, good, because Catherine Cartledge, who was in Naked, who died.
Of course,
sadly,
she died. Yes, she died very young.
She did, which is a great tragedy.
It is.
But I mention it because if I don't mention it, nobody ever does. Because for some reason, everyone seems to forget about that film. But I've got, apart from in fact, it's one of Catherine's 2 films that I made with her. She was great, and it is. I'm very fond of it, really. Mm-hmm. And it was a sort of thing that we did very quickly on the back of Secrets and Lies.
That's right.
And that may
That's
be
the
why
one I was thinking of for some reason.
Yeah.
When you mentioned Career Girls, my mind went to Secrets and Lies.
But anyway, I'm glad you like it because it's,
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it since it came out. But mind you, again, since Life is Sweet, I went to see all your films in the theater.
I also, if you ask me which you're not, which I'm in one sense most proud of in terms of the work we all did and the resonance of the film, it would probably be Vera Drake, because that was quite an achievement on everybody's part that contributed to it, really. Mm-hmm. And a tough film to make because it is a period film. Mm-hmm. And of course it's blessed with the most extraordinary acting, of course, but it's got all the work on it, from the cinematography to everything else. I'm very pleased with that film, I must say. Mm.
And you've worked consistently with Dick Pope on all these films?
Ever since Life is Sweet in 1990. I haven't worked with any other cinematographer. And we have a very brilliant relationship. We have got a very a compulsive habit of pushing our own boundaries. Mm-hmm. I mean, the decision to make a film about the great painter J.M.W. Turner was obviously a huge cinematic challenge, and we absorbed, we immersed ourselves in Turner's work for a number of years, and the look of Turner is there in the movie.
Yes, yeah.
And, the look of Peterloo is fantastic. I mean, he's done an amazing job, really.
Yeah, no, he's incredible, and he's been really recognized internationally too.
Oh, yeah. Another contributor to my films, who will maybe get overlooked but shouldn't, is John Gregory, who's the editor. He got nominated for three billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri, a couple of years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
For the Academy Award. He is an absolutely brilliant editor, and of course, although the cut of the film is the responsibility of the director, and I'm no exception, of course, you do need to have a brilliant editor. And when it comes to Peterloo, when it comes to that great massacre sequence, for which we shot a massive amount of footage of all, sometimes using 3 cameras, he was just brilliant at sorting it out and really making it work according to my general instructions. I mean, you have to have an editor of that brilliance to make it as good as it is. Really. What
would be amidst those instructions that you would have, or part of the conversation you would have with him regarding specifically the massacre itself, which is the penultimate scene, and it's extended. Well, I mean, this is not something which is just like a minute or two. This is how many minutes is that massacre?
It's quite long.
It is, yeah.
And it took us 5 weeks to shoot. We didn't talk about my instructions. I mean, first of all, the material is all there and the story has to be told. So obviously there's guidance from me on that. I mean, this is regular film director stuff. It's not just this is how film directors work. If they are responsible for the material, if they're on the case, which not all directors perhaps are. But it's down to details, it's down to the precise order in which things happened and the precise weight of one thing against another, and and those are the things that where the editor needs the freedom to play about with the details of the footage, but the director needs to keep an eye on the structure and the movement of the thing and the rhythm of the thing.
How did you meet him?
Oh, John, I met him in the BBC years ago when he was not cutting my films, but he was in the next door cutting room cutting somebody else's film.
I see.
He cut High Hopes and everything.
Oh, okay.
He cut Life is Sweet and Naked and Secrets and Lies.
All the greatest hits.
And then there was a gap because he was doing other things, and then he came back and did the latter, the last few films.
And how did you meet Pope?
Dick Pope?
Yeah.
Well, I worked with a great cinematographer called Roger Pratt, who's gone on to make all kinds of Hollywood films. Yeah. But Roger had been a clapper loader originally on the Monty Python films. So he knew Terry Gilliam. And when Terry Gilliam started to do features, he developed his relationship, and Roger couldn't shoot. He shot Meantime and High Hopes, but then was supposed to shoot my next film, which was going to be what turned out to be Life is Sweet, but he was going to do The Fisher King with Terry Gilliam, and he wasn't available. And somebody had said to me, if ever Roger's not around, you should meet this guy, Dick Pope. He's a documentary film cameraman, cinematographer, and he's only done one little Welsh language television feature, but he'd be great. So I met him, and we clicked, and he did Life is Sweet, and the rest is history. And there you go.
So who was the cinematographer you worked with initially?
Roger Pratt.
Roger Pratt, that's who it was, okay. Well, I have been following these films so closely, over the years, that I felt like I feel like you feel like you get to know somebody, who's making these films. What is your relationship with audiences, especially like in the UK?
With what?
With your audiences in the UK. I mean, what is? Are you able to sort of live normal life, or are you?
Oh no, I live a very normal life. Well, I mean, insofar as anyone lives a normal life, I mean,
are you? Do you? I mean, people constantly recognize you in the UK.
Yeah, they do. They do, and that's cool. I mean, they do in the street and in the supermarket.
You don't mind that?
No, not at all. No, not at all. With very rare exceptions, they are nothing but enthusiastic, and they say, "I love your films." And almost invariably, I'm surprised, and I think, "How do they know it's me?" But of course, They do, and there you go. No. I mean, just occasionally. I mean, I came out of my apartment, which is right in central London, actually, and I crossed the road, and a young black guy came up to me and said, "You are a," he used a word I can't use in your programme. He said, "Your films are disgusting." He said, "They're an insult to humanity," and he threw a terrible fit and stomped off down the street. I don't know what his problem was, but he certainly wasn't a fan. But that's the rare exception.
Yeah, I imagine it is. And maybe he got the wrong guy. Maybe
No, he knew who I was. No question about that.
Oh, interesting.
He was more specific than I've just summarised.
What do you think people...
Well, I don't know, but the other thing that happens, which is far more interesting and certainly much funnier, is that, things happen like I came out of the underground and a woman ran after me and said, "I have to say, I love your film about the Spanish Civil War." And or somebody else says, "Kes, I love Kes, it's my favourite film." And Ken Loach gets the same thing. They think he's me. And what's weird is that we don't make the same kind of films and that we don't look like each other at all.
Right.
But people still somehow put us together and mix us up.
Right. I would say his last... What was it called again?
I, Daniel Blake.
I, Daniel Blake might be in a way, his closest Mike Leigh film.
I think that's pushing it, really.
Yeah. Well, it's obviously different style, but tone. But
well, anyway, that in the context of what you were asking me about.
Yes.
That is an amusing thing.
So Ken Loach, and he's a bit older too.
He certainly is.
You're young man compared. He keeps threatening to retire.
I know.
Good that he breaks his own promises. Right?
Sure.
Yeah. And do you keep up in the cinema? Here?
Oh yeah.
And also in the U.S. I mean, when it comes to the Oscar contenders or stuff, does that matter to you? Did you...
Films are films.
Oh, good.
Films are films. I mean, there are some films, much hyped films, that I find it harder to work up particular enthusiasm to see. But, I saw pretty much all the... Well, I'm an Academy member apart from anything else.
Right.
And when the London Film Festival happens... in the autumn every year, I get a free pass, and I just clear my diary and just watch movies all day. I want to see movies. I think people say, "Oh, it's surprising for a filmmaker." Novelists that don't read books or painters that don't look at art would seem to me an anomaly. Really, it seems a very natural thing for a film director to want to watch movies, and I do.
Sure,
but films is not Hollywood. Films is world cinema, and that's important.
Right. Yeah. I think, Fellini.
Well, I don't Fellini, that's for sure.
But I guess...
let's be clear what I mean. I mean, there are, of course, classic world cinema, which is what you mean when you say Fellini,
that's right,
is one thing and very important. But I mean contemporary, continuing, fresh world cinema.
Right.
Because there's all kinds of movies being made in places where they haven't even previously made movies.
That's right.
Which are really, really exciting and fresh and original and not hidebound by Hollywood precepts of what a movie should be.
That's right. And the festivals are really the best places to go to see them because, first of all, a lot of them don't get distributed, at least very broadly.
You say they're the best. In a way, festivals are very often the only way to get to see those.
Yes, that's right.
But the good news is, this is why actually DVD and hopefully streaming are good news, that is a way of accessing material that we may not otherwise have the opportunity to see.
And there are a couple of streaming services that actually do focus on let's say, I'm using these words, they're not used by obscure international cinema.
Sure.
Whether it's some Iranian film that maybe just...
What I call world cinema.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. But people should go to festivals. I mean, there's obviously international festivals, and then there's more, let's say, American, like we have here. Tons, every neighborhood has a film festival, and they're much more local and domestic and all that. But so interesting. But do you go to Cannes if you don't have a film?
No,
or if you're not being
no.
rewarded?
I wouldn't dream of going to Cannes if I didn't have to.
Right.
Cannes is a horrible experience. But if you've got a film in competition,
right.
And I've been a number of times always with a film in competition. That's the reason for being there. Oh, I was once on the jury, and that was another reason for being there.
Sure.
No. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Apart from anything else, I wouldn't go unless somebody was paying, because it's very, very expensive.
That's true
but
too.
Also, it's a kind of chaotic circus, you know.
Mm-hmm. Will there be, as we do wind it down, will there be another? Are you working on another story? I guess this is the most typical question, but I as a fan, I do want.
You want the answer to your question?
I can yammer on.
Get to the end of the question and I'll answer it.
Thank you for putting me in my place.
No, it's all right. I can see what you're asking me.
I know, it's just terrible. But I'm not good at QA. I'm good at conversations, less so at QA.
Yes.
Formal.
Well, even that's open to some debate. The point is that until I have the money for another film, I refuse to contemplate exactly what it will be, because it will be determined, given the way I make films, it will be determined by the size of the budget. And so I'm waiting for money. I've been waiting for nearly a year for money. It has not been forthcoming for a year. But hopefully, as and whenever money does materialise, I will then roll up my sleeves and make a film. And until that time, I can't tell you anything. And even if I knew exactly what it was, I still wouldn't tell you, because you'd have to wait and see.
Fair enough.
Okay.
That's it. I'm liberating you. Can you just say one thing?
Yes.
This is where you're just performing for me. Just all you have to do is say, like, this is Mike Leigh and you're listening to my show. Can you do that? Do you mind?
You write it down.
Ahead? Okay.
Don't write down that this is Mike Leigh.
No, I got that part. And you can say it any way you want to. Essentially,
Sure,
I'm just going to stick this in the show. It's...
What does that say? Filmwax.
That's right.
Filmwax Radio.
That's right.
Why is it called Filmwax Radio?
No reason.
You see, the reason I ask the question is because people have been asking me lately, how do you feel about Netflix and streaming and all the rest of it? And I say, well, it's progress. I say, well, I listen to a lot of music in my apartment, and I don't listen to it on wax cylinders, because they dried out about 1910. And I'm forced to listen to them on CDs, listen to music on CDs, because that's the mode. And even now, that is becoming obsolete. So that's why I asked you why it's called Film Wax. Nothing to do with wax cylinders.
No, mostly, no.
Okay.
But
well, anyway,
mostly to do with waxing.
Anyway, this is Mike Leigh, and you are listening to Film Wax Radio.